On today's episode of the In the Podcast, we are joined by James Arcellana, co-host of the Black Hole Banter podcast and editor of Black Hole Banter blog, to talk a little bit about the Raiders. And we'll get you up to date on everything you need to know for the game, including DeVante Parker's injury, Reshad Jones' injury, and who to watch going into the game. Let's get on with the show. There in the Hump Podcast. We're back. We got a couple more days for the Dolphins face off against the Raiders. And Topher, did you forget the Dolphins are undefeated?
I did not, but you know who they play on Sunday? The Raiders.
That's like the best, the only good thing about the Raiders, and that Chris Berman gave us that, just the ability to sound like a pirate when going Raider. I can't even do it. I might edit that out. That was bad.
No, you leave it in there. Let's do one more time. The Raiders.
Okay, that one was a little better. I feel either way. I feel gross doing it. I might have to go on like a 2-week
or just take a shower.
Might take a shower. Might go on like a cleanse for a week after that. But Topher, we got a lot to talk about today because there's a lot going on with the Dolphins. Specifically, Reshad Jones is now on the injury report with a shoulder injury, and that mostly came to be because of that tackle he made at the 1-yard line.
I mean, when I saw that he was hurt, I instantly thought, so this is what it feels like when you're going to go 16-0 and injuries start to pile up. I was like, God dang it. Like, this is how it happens. Like, the team could be legit good.
Yep.
And then this is what makes you 7-9, 8-8, 9-7, and it's just because of injuries. It's injuries, and this happens with every team. That usually the healthiest team at the end survives.
Absolutely.
And so this is how it kind of would start with the Dolphins. Is like these little nicks. It's just nicks, we call them, right? Mm-hmm. That's the football term. Nicks and bruises.
Spot on. That should be what you can put on an injury report. Just why is someone out?
Day-to-day nicks and bruises.
That's probably why Danny Amendola didn't practice today. For
100%. Nicks and bruises. That's it.
We got our injuries out of the way. We're getting ready to face the Raiders. Gruden did a little interview today. He was actually confronted about this. Someone had told him, why do you always say Tannehill instead of Tannehill? And I guess there was just some guy in South Carolina who was a quarterback whose name was Tannehill. And Gruden got a little defensive about it. He's like, oh, you can't really blame me. Like, everyone makes mistakes. It's like, only Dolphins Twitter got upset about that. And I don't even know why. You mispronounced his name. I've been called Mendel for years. I mean, who cares?
You know what? I think it's cool. It's like one of those things where, like, we finally got to the bottom of why someone calls him Tannehill. Like, we got to the bottom of it. There's actual, like, it's like research. It's intrepid reporting that we've always wondered, why do these analysts and hosts call him Tannehill? And now we finally got one. It's because, there was a quarterback in North Carolina, according to John Gruden, that had the last name Tannehill.
Agreed.
That's really it. Like, I was like, oh, it's interesting. At least we got something.
Yeah.
Instead of just like butchering the last name.
Exactly. And it's a little funny, but Gruden wasn't the only one who, had an interview today. Gase did as well. And the one thing I really took away from it, well, outside of them saying Rashad's day-to-day, which is actually a pretty good feeling, is when he was talking. What'd you say?
With nicks and bruises.
Nicks and bruises. Hashtag nicks and bruises. Is when he was asked about Charles Harris, and his quote was this: Harris has been doing what he's been asked. How, is that?
It's the good old adage, the good old NFL adage: do your job.
But isn't his job to get to the quarterback?
His job is to be a first-round pick and get us hopeful that when Cam Wake retires, we can have Charles Harris fill right in.
And how do you feel about that so far?
I mean, I saw kind of like a very condescending tweet on Sunday that Charles Harris was like the fourth-string defensive end on fourth in the depth chart.
Yep.
I thought that was a little too much, considering what the defensive line is doing.
Right.
But, obviously you'd like to see more, but I mean, it's a second year. Like it might, it takes some time. Like it's not like we're sitting here like relying on him to be this like sack master.
No doubt.
Like it's just like he's a depth guy right now, rotational guy. Of course you'd like to see production out of him. You'd like to see him do something. But I mean, I'm not too like worried about it because they have guys up front who are actually doing their job, like actually doing their job, not just saying they're doing their job.
Right, and a lot of people are coming out and looking at how fast quarterbacks are releasing the ball because we're nerds.
That's the new stat, right? I feel like that's the new NFL saber metric is a quick time throwing.
We're a bunch of goddamn nerds, but the Dolphins only have one more sack than the Raiders.
Air yards is another stat. Air yards.
Classic air yards. Good old yak. How excited are we to watch the Raiders in all black play a 1 p.m. game in Miami?
I'm getting exhausted thinking about it. Like I'm that Key and Peele a gif of just sweat pouring down me.
Just sweat bullets.
That's what I imagine the Raiders are going to be because I've been to those games, pre-canopy era where it was, the old school Dolphin logo, and it was hot.
Just sitting there, yeah,
just sitting there, and they're in all black. And I swear, like if this team wears like they have no alternate colors, right? Unless it's like silver, right? But they can't do it. Like that's the fear is like they wear a silver, but they're going black. They're going black and silver, and you got to imagine they're gonna die of heat exhaustion. It wouldn't shock me if they have like 5-6 players cramping up by the third quarter.
Oh, no doubt. Over under half a player throws up.
That we see it? Oh no, actually, better. How fast into the game do you think we'll have that thermometer on the screen?
Oh, it's gonna be 15 minutes before the game. There's no doubt.
15 with like Armin Kantayan, like he's the vintage thermometer guy. Like that's it, right? Like it's gonna be. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Highs and where I live in Sunrise, highs of 89, with humidity at 68. But like. Oh my God! They have a thunderstorm on this thing. I swear, if we get another lightning delay, I'm gonna lose it.
Oh,
but yeah, you're gonna get the thermometer on the field. You're gonna get field temperature and then like heat index in Broward, in Miami-Dade County. Like if we're doing prop bets.
Good old prop bets. Right now, Lynch is averaging 3.7 yards a carry. The Raiders in general are averaging 16 points a game, and the Dolphins are allowing 16 points a game. Do we just want to give them those 16 and just call it a day?
Give it to them on one big play. One big play. Just one big play. Like a bonus. A bonus. It's Marshawn Lynch running for like 80 yards, 16 yards. Worth 16 points. I mean, it's weird. We're like, it's David Carr. He went like 19 for 21.
25 for 27.
Oh, okay. So some insane accurate, some insanely high completion percentage. That's always been a team, or he's always been a quarterback along with Amari Cooper that kind of like scares me.
Oh, Amari Cooper.
All it takes for them,
You said Derek Carr like Amari Cooper is a quarterback that's scares
me. Yeah. Actually, I said David Carr. But Derek Carr and Amari Cooper, I like that tandem has always kind of like scared me a little bit because they're good. Like I think Amari Cooper's good, and I always have the fear that he'll be good against Miami. That like this will be the game where like they score 28.
Do you know who will be covering him?
What's his nickname, buddy?
Well, it doesn't matter what his nickname is because Amari Cooper is going to be excommunicated.
Oh, dear God.
I'm excited for this game. This is the first game where, like, obviously you do it a little bit for Jets week, but this is the first game I'm really feeling like a cocky Heat fan. But Dolphins.
Really?
I guess.
Man, yeah. I haven't. It's going to take a while for me to get cocky. Like, it's going to win this game, like I said, I want them to pour it on Oakland. If they have the chance to do it, that's really it. Like, I think the game will be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be boring at times, right? Like mid-second quarter, mid-third quarter, where it's just going to get like boring, where the offenses aren't moving at all. It's vintage Dolphins this season, as of right now, is that period in the second quarter and third quarter where the offense isn't moving, and then it just explodes.
I think they're going to be focused on trying to gas the other team. And I don't know how you can't be cocky when they're playing at like 10 a.m. I don't know. The best game I've been to, well, the two games I've been to, I know I bring this up, is the Houston game a couple years ago where the Dolphins had more points than the Texans had yards at halftime. And then the game against the Chargers, which is like the first one I ever went to, where they dominated like 39-0. And it's because it's West Coast teams cannot travel to the East Coast. Now that I say that, the Dolphins are probably going to lose, but I'm here for it.
I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, you like. I mean, they gotta go. They gotta go to the the East Coast. Their games basically at 10 o'clock their time, 1 o'clock obviously our time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dolphins have actually even proven that they're a good team at home.
Right.
Like no matter what analysts say, no matter what the bets say, they're a good team at home, and I think they're favored as of now by 5.5. So you should feel confident. Like you should feel cocky. You should feel confident in that because all the numbers and the stats prove that the Dolphins should win the game.
I agree, and like I haven't watched much of the Raiders this year, so I started like looking at stats, and they haven't played as bad as I really thought. Their numbers are actually like pretty comparable to Miami, but I think the one thing that really stands out is the defensive like rushing yards. The Dolphins are only letting up like 79 a game, where the Raiders are allowing twice as many, sitting at 154. And I think that's kind of what the game's going to come down to is the running game, because the one issue I think we're really starting to see with the Dolphins, and it's kind of been an issue for a little while, is like the mindless turnovers, because right now the Dolphins are averaging 2 a game, and the best the best way to prevent that is by keeping the ball on the ground. We shouldn't really have to worry about Carr too much, where he only has 1 touchdown in the season to 3 interceptions, and their leading receiver is Jared Cook with 200 yards. That it just seems like play a clean game, and we're gonna be able to bust open some plays, especially third, fourth quarter. I think special teams can play a big role. Jakeem Grant, when everyone's super tired. DeVante Parker's playing.
Yeah, I mean the offense. I think the offense should be better this game just because you're getting DeVante Parker back. And I read something. I think it was Armando or Barry Jackson basically said that this has to do with DeVante, that maybe like defenses have to switch things up with DeVante if Gesicki's on the field, because they've been saying that the Dolphins have said that Gesicki's been getting doubled,
which is insane.
Which is insane considering he hasn't really proven much. So
he hasn't proven a single thing.
And so it's going to be interesting if they're on the field at the same time and what teams do with that. Because who knows? Like you could make the argument that the teams that they haven't really thrown the ball deep too much is because they haven't had guys that could go do that, and they really haven't had the need to, and maybe they haven't had, the defenses haven't given it to them because they know what the Dolphins aren't going to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right, because DeVante might not necessarily be the guy to go deep, but him and Gesicki are going to...
He's a playmaker. He's a playmaker.
Right. These are going to be the guys who can get open 20, 30 yards down the field on like comebacks, crossers, things like that, where they can use their body. So when you have the safeties have to come down and, stop these guys, is all of a sudden when you see, the Kenny Stills wide open or the Albert Wilson all open. But we've seen it, yes, but I think we're going to have more opportunities to shoot downfield instead of the 1 or 2 times a game, because Parker gives you that. If it's 1v1 and he catches the ball on the run, he should be able to break almost any tackle on the field. And then, like we saw, I think 2 years ago, the second Jets game, I think Parker caught like a slant across the middle and just took it to the house, like 70-something yards, just because if you don't make that first tackle and he starts like moving his legs, you ain't bringing him down.
Yeah, he's done that a lot. Where he'll break a play and run. It'll be a drag route coming across.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm excited for. I'm excited to see him, and I'm hoping that when you have DeVante on the field, that coverages are adjusted, and teams kind of have to the Dolphins open up the field a little bit more instead of going so horizontal. They go a little bit vertical as well.
Exactly, and I think he'll be the fun DraftKings play or something. I think DeVante, if he plays, is going to have a huge game, because then we kind of bashed him a lot, and he's not really lived up to expectations, and we're kind of shooting for the stars here. But the hope is he has a huge game.
Yeah, the hope is he has a huge game. But what do you think of like the Dolphins being one of the least penalized teams?
Thank freaking God! Like it took long enough, because so much talk about discipline.
As of now, they are.
Right, exactly. Let's hope it stays that way, because last year they were the most. I mean, it's basically impossible to go from 32nd to first. But give me like
9 penalties. They've committed 9 penalties this year.
Exactly, and I think we mentioned it on our week 2 review, the morning after Monday quarterback, that There was no penalties on the offensive line last week, which is freaking awesome.
That's I think with that kind of consistency and basically not making those mistakes, that the offense is eventually going to get drives. I think the Jets defense is probably the best. It's the best defense they've played so far, and it's not really saying much since it's been 2 games. But you would think with not making the mistakes that the offense is good, and the offense will open up with DeVante, that they actually would score some points. In a more consistent manner, I should say, and it'd be more consistent with their scoring.
Right. Then we wouldn't get, the 0-point second half that we saw against the Jets, which sure, they won. We're not complaining too much about it. It's just one more touchdown in like the fourth quarter and the game would have been iced instead of having it.
Yeah, I think they'll win. Who knows though? You just hope they stay healthy and you hope the nicks and bruises don't take effect.
Yep.
But what do you think of this? This is from at C Towers at CBS. The only QB to start 2 games and attempt 5 or fewer passes more than 15 yards down the field are Derek Carr and Ryan Tannehill, and both at 4.
It makes more sense for Tannehill because the only quarter the Dolphins haven't, at least been tied so far this year is the first quarter against the Titans game. So you're not really going to throw it deep and risk interceptions when the game's that close, especially early on. And then, the Dolphins kind of had control late where they didn't really have to shoot for the stars too much. So I'm not too worried about the Raiders. Is a little more questionable because the Raiders have trailed in 5 quarters. So how are you going to come back, especially say it's a 10, 12-point deficit, without throwing it deep, without getting a quick strike like that? It's a little questionable to me.
Yeah, you would think the volume would inflate that stat. And what do you think of the Pro Football Focus's power rankings having Miami all the way they're basically saying that their defense is ranked 30th in their system. As of right now, they're ranked 18th in their little, in their power rankings. But their defense has also been shaky, 30th in our system. So we're not completely bought on the Dolphins so far. I get the not bought on them. I get that, but I don't get the shaky part because they haven't really shown to be shaky. Like at least I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and they have 4 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. That's a turnover-prone defense, and they've been good against the run. Yeah, I just thought that was weird. I think the funniest part about that too is the people. I had some people in my mentions talking about this today, where they're like, "Oh, well, PFF's such an opinion. They're following ESPN. They're clueless." And these are the same people. Like I went back into their tweets where they lived and died by Pro Football Focus, especially early on with Tannehill, where that was.
Oh yeah. That was like the bread and butter.
And it just kills me how people are willing to go. It's like, okay, instead of being upset about the people who disagree with you, go hang out with the people who agree with you. It's not that challenging. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then they go and have the Dolphins, their offensive line ranked 21st after week 2. Daniel Kilgore is the highest rated, followed by Laramie Tunsil and Juwan James. Daniel Kilgore is at 68. Tunsil's at 66 and Juwan James at 65.
I've never thought that PFF lineman grades are, if someone's near the bottom of the league as a guard, you're not necessarily going to see it on every play. It's not like they're going to give up a sack every play. And I think like Mike Pouncey's like the 7th rated center right now. It's like let things play out a little bit. Of course, there's going to be pressure up the middle. They don't have the best guards, but
I think it'll just ruin an offense. It'll make an offense complicated in terms of like they might not be as successful, but they'll still get the job done.
No doubt.
Yeah, you'll give up the sack and everything, but like it's not like he snaps the ball and then it's just a bum rush.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's what I think about linemen at least.
And Topher, we'll end with this for right now. Give me your final score prediction.
It's not going to be 20-17 Dolphins. I'm gonna go 28-17.
28-17?
28-17.
I was thinking somewhere around 28-14, maybe 31-14, somewhere around there. I think the Dolphins take care of this one pretty easily. And the only thing is they can't get caught looking ahead. We can't be looking at the
classic trap. Is this a trap game?
Ooh.
Or look ahead game.
I think this is.
You don't want to get stuck. You don't want to get stuck in a black hole.
Nice. I think Gase has done a good job of not letting that happen in his 3 years. I mean, Well, we're gonna say 2 years. We're not gonna think about 2017 ever again. Forget it. Didn't happen. And we are now joined by James Arcellana, aka at Raiders Report on Twitter. And James, I'd like your input. Can you tell me the time and place you were when the Raiders signed John Gruden?
Ooh, I was fully expecting you to ask me where I was when they traded Khalil Mack, so that threw me for a little bit of a loop.
Oh, don't worry.
Question number 2.
No, I don't remember exactly where I was. I feel like it was one of those things that there was some build up to it, so you kind of knew it was coming, and when it actually happened, you were kind of just ready for it to move on and find out what it meant. Yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was. I still remember when I was when I found out that they had fired Jack Del Rio and made him announce his own firing, which was pretty entertaining.
It's such an Oakland thing. No offense.
Are you kidding me? Completely.
I just want to know, like, what was it like? Because we go from watching him on Monday Night Football. We've seen him in Oakland. And I just want to know, it's like bringing back Jimmy Johnson for the Dolphins. Or like Dave Wannstedt, and are you expecting the same result, the same successful result, playoffs and all that, or has your heart changed since he's been there?
It's funny. I feel like there's really kind of 2 schools of thought when it comes to John Gruden from Oakland Raiders fans. There are the guys who, they look at John Gruden and all they can think about is Chucky and the great days and the success
visor.
in Oakland. Yeah, the visor, the scowl. And then there's the people who I tend to fall more in line with and who look at his entire career as a coach, and it wasn't that impressive. His time with Oakland was great. I loved it. We had a lot of fun, won a lot of games, but he went to Tampa Bay, won the Super Bowl, and credit to him for that. A lot of people say, well, it wasn't his team. Well, he still coached them, though, so right. Credit to that. But then he failed to do anything afterwards. His record is pretty average. I'm not knocking him as a coach. He was not the, instant guaranteed success that a lot of people saw him. I didn't see him that way. I think he's a solid coach. I don't think he's some amazing coach who's going to come in day one and win you a Super Bowl just because he's John Gruden.
Exactly. And that's why 10-year contract, that's just like such a guarantee where he's kind of, I don't want to say a roller coaster, but you're not, like you said, guaranteed such a great, coach right away or even at all. So how big is your, string with him? How far are you willing to go? I mean, what was your idea when they traded Mac? Did you think that the franchise is still going in a good direction with a move like that?
So, when they hired Gruden, my thought process was, if he is just the coach and not the GM, they're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. He may not be like an amazing Hall of Fame coach, but he's a solid coach. So as long as he's the coach and not the GM, they'll be okay. The problem is he's the coach and the GM, and the result was Khalil Mack. And I can't still to this day wrap my head around the fact that happened. You didn't ask, but I'll share. I was on vacation when Khalil Mack was traded. And I was a few time zones behind Oakland. And so I woke up and it was like 4 or 5 a.m. I went to go use the bathroom and I grabbed my phone and check it as I'm prone to do. And there's a little Bleacher Report notice. And I said, oh, shit. I knew instantly this isn't good. There's no way this is good news. And I opened it and it says they've agreed to trade Khalil Mack. And I spent the next probably 15, 20 minutes scouring Twitter, hoping to find someone say that this was fake. It was not real. It didn't actually happen. And instead, I spent some time that morning pissing off my wife as I wrote an article about it because I couldn't get over that it just happened. So, I made her stay in the hotel room a little bit longer than she wanted to because I was so, I had to put words to paper because I was just so beside myself about what happened.
I think the best part of that trade is now you're going to get the same discussion for the next 10 years that the Dolphin fans will get with Drew Brees. The fact that they passed up Drew Brees to get DeVante Parker, now you get it where you traded Khalil Mack. And now every time he's getting 2 sacks a game, it's going to be John Gruden. You're going to feel terrible every single time. Congrats.
And we're already seeing it, right? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, instantly. It's all the questions he gets asked. And he doesn't help himself by saying, yeah, we really need to get a pass rush. And it's it's one of those things you've had it. And as a Dolphin fan, I totally get why you'd be upset because we've done those moves in our history. Like for the past 10, 15 years, we've done that move where you trade your stud or you don't, or you pass over the stud because it does, for whatever reason, but it doesn't make sense as why you do it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I don't know with regards to the things that Gruden is saying. At this point, I don't know if you guys saw the quote today. At this point, I almost feel like Gruden is trolling us because today he said it's really hard to find a great pass rusher.
Yeah.
At this point, either he's incredibly lacks any kind of self-awareness, or he's just screwing with us. Yeah, exactly.
So
I think at this point he's so confident in himself that he's just kind of screwing with us and having fun with it.
How long do you think it is? 0-2 and building a team's a process. I don't think no one expected him to come in and be good. But 2 years ago, before Derek Carr got hurt, this team that team was awesome. That team was ready to compete for freaking Super Bowl. How long do you think he has until people are asking maybe for his head if, say, one of the draft picks doesn't work out in the first year, or this year they only go, say, 7-9 or something like that?
Well, so I think it depends on who you're talking about. There's already some Raiders fans calling for his head. So fans will often overreact, and so there's some fans who are already calling for his head, and I think it's a little premature. If we're talking the Raiders organization, I think he's got a really long rope. I think Mark Davis is in love with him, and he's going to give him tons of opportunities.
Right.
If you're talking about the general media, I think they've got to be in the playoffs next year. I think there's some forgiveness for this year because a lot of people are looking at what he's done and the dramatic overhaul. There's only, I think it was something like 15 players who were on the roster from last season. He's completely overhauled the roster. So I think there's some people who are giving him some leeway this season, saying, okay, well, he has a different vision for this team. So, not huge expectations this season, but you don't get paid $10 million a year and sign a 10-year contract for $100 million if the expectations are not playoffs. So they've got their franchise quarterback. He chose himself to get rid of their franchise pass rusher. They have the tools. So, I don't imagine he's going to be able to, middle round of mediocrity for very long before people start calling him out.
How do you feel about the Raiders coming from Oakland, now going to Miami and for a 1:00 game? Like the whole, West Coast to East Coast thing doesn't really bode well for, those West Coast teams. Do you see the Raiders starting slow? Do you see them, kind of clicking and everything and finally start working out? Or do you just see it as being a complete disaster?
For the Raiders in particular, the whole 10 a.m. East Coast start has been a real boogeyman. They've really, really struggled and a couple times at the hands of the Dolphins. I think in the past, it was really a symbol of the dysfunction of the franchise that they weren't prepared for those kinds of games. Mm-hmm. If, the one thing I will say, a couple things I would say positively about Gruden, despite some negative things I'd have to say. He's had this team ready to play in the first quarter of every game. They've played extremely well in the first half. What they've struggled with is second half adjustments and closing games out in the fourth quarter. But he's had them there ready to play in both games, one on the road and one on Monday night with huge expectations. So I think they'll come ready to play. I don't think they're going to have a hangover like they have in the past, and a lot of teams do traveling from west to east. But the big question is whether or not they're going to be able to still come with the same intensity late in the fourth quarter that they bring in the first quarter.
Sitting on the East Coast sometimes, after the 1:00 games, especially watching the Dolphins, especially watching a game with a lightning delay, we don't necessarily always get to watch the Raiders. And, I knew they were 0-2, and I thought their stats were a lot worse, especially offensively, than they really are. How frustrating has it been, seeing Carr complete 25 for 27 and they only score 19, or that, Cook is their leading receiver? Do you see this as the offense might be some sort of an issue trying to, break it open? Or is this something that maybe scheme's going to kind of work itself out and this offense has the potential we kind of see in it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is it's just a scheme that's a work in progress. It's someone on Twitter, I wish I could remember who it was so I could credit them. They said they made the comparison that the Raiders offensive players are essentially going from a playbook that was put together with crayons by a kindergartner to a playbook that is meant for, a graduate level degree. So there's a big learning curve going from the terrible scheme they were in last year to a very complex scheme this year. And I think that if you look at, the game 1 to game 2, there was a lot of improvement on the offense. I know it doesn't necessarily reflect on the scoreboard.
Mhm.
I think that has more to do with conservative play calling late in game than it does to do with the players not being able to score and to put points up on the board with that offense. I think a couple of times they traded field goals for touchdowns, which was bad. And then late in the game, John Gruden completely took his foot off the pedal and, slowed it down and tried to eat clock, and it ended up biting him in the butt in the end.
As I'm looking at one of your columns right now, and it's on Raiders get worn down in Denver and another second half let down. Do you think that could happen in Miami, considering like the elements of South Florida, that you take the letdown and now you add Mother Nature to it, because that's kind of like what a lot of Dolphin fans are banking on. And we do that with every team, not just the Raiders, but we do that with every team, that the heat down here, the humidity is in itself a home field advantage. Do you see something happening like that similar to the Raiders?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. Like I said, at the end of that Denver game, they were absolutely gassed. There's a video going around of Bruce Irvin on the last drive, the drive where, you guys saw it, is just absolutely pathetic.
Mhm.
So they looked absolutely gassed. I think part of that was probably the elevation, but hey, swap out elevation for humidity and you've got, the same kind of issue that, can really impact a team. And so I actually think that, excuse me, a roster move that the Raiders made this week, they brought up Shalik Calhoun, a pass rusher from their practice squad. I think that was aimed specifically at trying to stop that from happening by getting another pass rusher on the roster who can take some of those snaps away. So at the end of the game, guys like Irvin and Arden Key, their primary pass rushers, are a little more fresh. We'll see if it works out. Shalik Calhoun was on the practice squad for a reason. So it's not like you're bringing in a really talented pass rusher. You're just bringing in a guy who's going to eat up snaps in hopes that the other guys will be fresher later. So, I think that is a problem that the Raiders have recognized, and they're trying to address it through that roster move.
I know it must be pretty tough, especially on the West Coast, trying to watch Dolphin games. I'm sure they're not the, first game on your docket. Ooh, let's watch the Dolphins. Has there been anything when you're getting ready for this week, listening to the quotes, that concerns you about facing the Dolphins?
Honestly, it's mostly that I just am not quite sure what to make of the Dolphins yet. They've had some good moments and some bad moments this season, and I'm really the kind of guy who acknowledges the change in year to year in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Many times you look at a team and think they're going to be an easy win because they were bad last season, and suddenly they're a totally different team. I kind of reserve judgment. I will note that on my preseason predictions, had the Dolphins winning this game. And not necessarily because I thought they were a better team, but I thought that there was a fairly well-matched team, and that the conditions we were talking about earlier, the 10 a.m. West Coast start and the humidity, would end up playing an impact on the Raiders and allowing the Dolphins to get the win. So, I don't necessarily know what to think of the Dolphins yet, but that said, I don't know what to think of the Raiders yet.
Yeah, no doubt. So we kind of feel the same way about the Dolphins, and it kind of seems like the Raiders might even be Dolphins West if you want to really simplify it. Can you give me 3 players where when you're sitting at the end of the game writing up your article, you need to say that players X, Y, and Z had a good game for the Raiders to come out with a victory? Who would those players be?
For the game this week, I'm going to say Derek Carr, because it's the NFL and quarterbacks are so incredibly crucial, and especially within John Gruden's offense, it really relies on accurate quarterback making good decisions. So Derek Carr is always going to be a huge key. And also, in week 1, Derek Carr really struggled. He looked like the Derek Carr 2017 that was terrible. Mm-hmm. And then in week 2, he looked like the Derek Carr 2016 who was in conversations for the MVP. So we're not really sure what we're getting out of Derek Carr yet. So we're really hoping we're going to see more of last week than of week 1. So that's really important. Marshawn Lynch, we're going to stick on offense. Marshawn Lynch, because I think the key to a Raiders win is a strong run game. They were really able to establish a strong run game in the first half of the game last weekend, and they dominated that game that half as a result. So I think, again, looking at John Gruden's offense and what he tries to do with it, I think a strong run game is incredibly important. So Marshawn Lynch getting off and helping the Raiders offense get going, I think is really important. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Gary and Conley. The Raiders don't have a pass rush. It's really bad at this point. They've struggled immensely to get any kind of pressure on the quarterback. And so when that happens, I think it's important that the secondary steps up. And Gary and Conley's a guy who was drafted in the first round a couple years ago, didn't play very much at all last season due to injuries, but has shown some sparks of greatness this season. And so I think this is the game where he needs to step up and really shut some people down on Miami and really make up for the lack of pass rush, because he's the guy who's supposed to be the stud on the defense now. He's the first round pick left, so he's a guy who I really need to see step up and make a huge play and really, announce himself to the NFL.
What do you think's gonna what do you think the result's going to be? Like, Jake and I have the Dolphins winning. Of course, we're homers, but at the same time, it's just West Coast team coming over, 1:00. Raiders not playing well in the second half. You kind of basically your description of the Raiders is very similar to how we talk about the Dolphins. Player X needs to play well, Ryan Tannehill. Running game needs to get going. Marshawn Lynch, we got Kenyon Drake, Frank Gore. How do you see this game playing out? Do you see the Raiders getting their first win of the season, or do you see them going home 0-3?
It's funny. Like I said earlier in the preseason predictions, I listed this as a loss for the Raiders. But I also had the Raiders at 1-1 coming into this game. Mm-hmm. So I really think, and I know that may sound weird to say that them being 0-2 makes me change my mind, but I think it does a little bit, because I think that 0-2 record lights a fire under their asses a little bit. I think they're going to come out a little bit fired up. They're going to be upset. I don't know if you guys watched the game last week or not, but they were at a 9-point lead. I think like halfway through the fourth quarter. It was a game that everyone thought they were going to win. I was getting ready to write up a win, a victory column, and then things all fell apart in the fourth quarter. So I think they're really feeling that, and I think that they're going to come out extra motivated. They're going to counter all the negative effects, and I think they're going to pull off a win. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be a very competitive game. But I'm actually going to go ahead and switch it up and say the Raiders pull it off, just because I think they're going to be determined not to go.
They're due.
Yeah, I don't know if they're due so much as they just don't want to be humiliated.
Okay. That's fair. The final question's a pretty easy one. At Raiders Report, where can we read your articles?
Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me shout this out. It's BlackHoleBanter.com. You can find all the articles and the podcast there. Podcast is also on iTunes and all those other, podcast, Stitcher, whatever. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. It was fun talking to you guys, and I hope you enjoy the game.
For sure. You too, man. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Raiders!
The thing James brought up that really kind of stuck with me is the fact the Raiders are 0-2. Nothing is more scary than like a desperate team. And we didn't do a good job of talking about that, where I think he kind of hit the nail on the head, where I'm still confident I think that the Dolphins are going to win this game, but a team that is looking 0-3 in the face is going to try some pretty crazy things to win, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, especially John Gruden. Like, the dude left his cush job in ESPN, getting paid $10 million a year.
Yep.
To not go 0-3.
Exactly.
That was it. Like, and I found what I found interesting was that the way he discussed the Raiders is kind of how we discuss the Dolphins. Like, Tannehill's got to play well.
I think
player X on the deep. Yeah, that's a given. But like, more importantly, with like our specific teams. Like, if Tannehill plays bad, then like that game's gonna get really hard for the Dolphins. It's gonna be rough. Yeah. Where you're gonna expect the defense to get 3 to 4 sacks and do it. Like, we're been fortunate right now where Tannehill hasn't really played bad. He's just been, he's been conservative, made big throws when you needed it to, but he hasn't had a bad game where we're like, holy crap, how are we going to win this? And the running game's got to get going. He mentioned it. Marshawn Lynch, Doug Martin, they got to get going. The Dolphins got to get going. Our offense is predicated on the running game. Like, it's been our theme is running the ball. It's not the sexy way because we don't have those prototypical 20 carry guys, but it's what we got to do. And so, yeah, I was kind of shocked that he picked him to win, but it wouldn't shock me either way because it's the classic look ahead. He said that they've been up by 10 points. They were up by 9 in the second half against Denver, and they started off pretty well against the Rams. So it wouldn't shock me if they do have a lead at some point, and the Dolphins kind of have to make a comeback. And you're hoping that the heat and all that would happen.
We'll end with this question right here. How confident are you? Say the Dolphins are down 9 at home with 9 minutes left in the game. How confident are you that they could score twice?
It's one of those things where, okay, so say they score and they go up 9. Like, we'll do that, right? Like, you want to do it that way. You know, they go up 9.
Right.
You'd want them to score, or you would need the Dolphins to score right after that score to feel like vindicated, to feel great. Because otherwise, like, all it takes is one crappy drive that we know could happen, and it would, like, the air would be let out of the whole stadium. Like, you would totally hear boos if the Raiders go up 9 and the first drive in the Dolphins' chance to respond ends in 3 and out.
I 100% agree. And Topher, where can you find this podcast?
You can find us on @MIA in the Hunt. That's our Twitter account. We had some issues with iTunes the other day. I don't know why. They're trying to keep us down. They're too busy worrying about iPhones and not podcasts. But you can go on the podcast app on your iPhone and just type in Miami Dolphins, or type in the Hunt, a Miami Dolphins podcast. We're going to be up there. Since the season started, we've been getting a lot of downloads, a lot of listens. So thank you to the listeners. Jake's been going nuts with the Twitter feed, posting out stats, posting out GIFs. What about you, Jake? You mentioned something about videos you were talking to me earlier.
That we might have to wait a little bit on. We're going to try to do like a top 5 plays of the week thing. It kind of crashed when I tried to do it today, where I just kind of did the throw the computer out the window thing and just kind of walked away.
Okay. Totally get you. Totally get it. At least you threw it away. At least you threw the ball away. You didn't like hold on to it.
Exactly. Then you just got to go for a jog around the stadium to kind of recompose yourself, and we'll attack tomorrow. It's a new day.
But yeah, man, fins up, I guess, right? Or the Raiders. Fins up.